Daily Show. I'm your host, Jon Stewart, captain of this dying medium.
Patrick Klepek, let's talk about Jon Stewart's return to The Daily Show. Now, we discussed this a couple weeks ago. Jon Stewart's coming back. He's hosting on Monday nights, and he is also executive producing the rest of the week and kind of being a creative force in the show through this year's election. His return drew a lot of eyeballs. The episode had some decent ratings. The clip from the episode of his opening bit had over 8 million views on YouTube. My question for you, Patrick Klepek, overall, what did you think of Jon Stewart's return to this hallowed institution on Comedy Central?
I think Jon Stewart's return to The Daily Show is an interesting cultural, political litmus test for sort of like where you're at as a person. Watching the reactions to Stewart in which, so we've spent the last decade reckoning with culturally that Jon Stewart was kind of a both sides squish. And then he comes back and a bunch of supposed leftists don't like him. Where does that leave us as a country? Where does like people who are politically aligned, especially on the left? I thought it was a good but not great, but culturally fascinating return. It was well worth watching, I think, because of the cultural moment, more so than Jon Stewart making me feel like safe and relieving my anxiety about what's to come, especially this year. But I think especially as reflective of our current politics, I thought it was a fascinating moment that I'll be curious if it continues to have that sort of resonance going forward, or was this like the pilot, like the return of Stewart to this chair, the moment where a lot of people experience some form of anxiety or catharsis?
Well, I'm struck by how very frequently during these opening news segments, Patrick, you and I agree 100%, which often doesn't happen when we talk about shows like Twisted Metal. Or even the
never gonna let that one go. 5 years later, right? Dave's like, look, I pitched this podcast to you, and you pitched me Twisted Metal.
Well, I got the Continental in with you as well, so we both got one in on the Peacock original series front. But I think that how much you like Jon Stewart's return, and in particular that opening episode, can be best thought of or perceived through the lens of how much do you how important of an issue do you think Joe Biden's age is to the future of the American Republic? Like, whatever your answer is for that question, that will address, I think, whether you appreciated Jon Stewart coming back and spending a significant portion of his time discussing Joe Biden's age and the concerns around it. I will say this about Jon Stewart. I don't think he's lost a step in terms of his energy and in terms of how he can work the crowd and basically just be a force and a presence behind the desk. Like, I think if you enjoyed him back then, when he was still on The Daily Show, I honestly think, and by the way, none of your political opinions or perception of the world has changed in the 9 years since, then I think you will enjoy him now. Like, that's how I feel about it. But I also think that one of the reasons this appearance, this return, has created so much discourse and dialogue is because there's a lot of people, myself included, that wonder if this is the voice we need right now. If and specifically the questions he's asking are the ones that are most important to ask right now. In fact, he seemed to actually understand this as a criticism and acknowledged it directly on the air when his correspondent, Jordan Klepper, who's hosting the rest of the week, said this.
You must be so proud of yourself with all these little satirical bits exposing the absurdities of our political process.
In a segment that they did in banter on the show.
Did you save democracy yet?
No, I didn't.
Did you?
Shortly after that, of course, Jordan Klepper realizes that he's going to be hosting the rest of the week, and all is well. But Jon Stewart does seem to be hearing the criticism. He also addressed it on the second episode, which I'll discuss in a little bit. But I think that it all comes down to whether you think, the stuff that Jon Stewart's trying to talk about, which is in this case Joe Biden's age, is one of the most important questions we need to be talking about right now. He certainly seems to think it is. I don't think it's as important as other issues. It's notable, I think, in the first 2 episodes, he really hasn't addressed Trump directly in his opening monologues. He's talked about it during the interviews a little bit. But I do think that is worth noting as well, because Trump has said some really upsetting things about how he would rule in his second term, that Jon Stewart hasn't touched on. Now, still has time, but yeah. So those are my overall thoughts. Patrick Klepek, any reaction to anything I said?
Well, I would say I think there's a little more nuance to what Stewart was doing. I don't think it's exactly a return to just poking, like saying that both sides are equal. I think in the statement itself and the segment itself, he's actually pretty specific in pointing out, sure, if the Democrats put out a cardboard box that said politician A, I'm probably voting for politician A this fall, given what's on, like what's at stake, as you point out rightly, that the terror and what would happen to many great number of people I care about if Trump was elected a second time is very real. And yet I'm allowed to ask, hey, maybe I could vote for something more than a cardboard box. And I don't think that's both sides of them. I think that is certainly Stewart is guilty of saying both sides are bad and equal. I don't think that's what was happening in here. I think the nuance there is asking for a better Democratic Party if you're going to stamp your vote, and a little bit of pushing back on the blue no matter who kind of rhetoric that sometimes dominates these elections that feel as though the entire world is at stake. And that is not to diminish anything that's going to be at stake this fall. But I don't think it was as simple as just saying bringing up Joe Biden's age is inherently saying Trump and Biden are equal. And so,
yeah, first of all, I don't think I said. I apologize if that's what I said.
I feel that's that a lot
right.
of the more the
Sure.
The reaction to the show itself. I felt like that was a lot of the irritation to Stewart.
A lot of the criticism was, oh, he's playing both sides, but that's not what I said. Like what I said was, do you think that is the most important pressing issue that we have right now? And I personally don't believe it is. I think we have other more pressing issues.
I think it's got to start somewhere. It's like I feel like part of this is, if I end up watching more of the show or kind of, seeing which segments kind of like lift out in the weeks ahead, I'm more inclined to see what is Stewart's body of work, because this is a show that he's going to be doing weekly, used to do daily. And part of how you establish your hierarchy of priorities is over the long term. It's going to be a long goddamn year as we march towards the election. And so I think I'm more inclined to give Stewart a bit of a pass, because I don't necessarily know what I need right out of the gate is to be told the ways that Trump is bad necessarily. I don't know that I need that from Jon Stewart, I guess is what I'm saying. And so I'm more inclined to see, where does he choose to spend his time going forward, and how much has he really changed? It's very easy to do a segment that pokes fun at the easiest possible critique that has been established about Jon Stewart in his time post Daily Show. It's much harder to know how will that actually resonate in his work going forward. What does he prioritize as segments going forward? And I think it's maybe a little too early to make that determination.
Here's where I don't agree. I don't think it's too early to make that determination, because he deliberately chose to, he knew that this would be the time when he would possibly, if not be at his height, one of his peaks of most interest. And this was the segment that he chose to open with. Yes, there is something to be said about judging someone by their whole work, but he knew this is like, a lot of people will be judging him on this, and then we'll decide to come back based on this. And I will say I am disappointed that this is kind of how he chose to spend his time. And in addition to just the topic focus, I think he continues to kind of have this condescending detachment towards people that might think he could use his time in better or more productive ways, or asking different, more urgent questions. That sort of, I'm just a comedian, I'm not trying to save democracy. Why are you asking me to do anything that might make the world a better place. That tone continues in the show, and it's equally tiresome as it was back then. So it sounds like I'm like significantly more negative on this appearance than you are, and
I
that's
guess
cool.
my expectations just weren't.
Yeah.
I don't know what people were. I think, okay, if I back up a little bit, I think ascribing a malaise amongst folks' approach to politics in the 2000s,
Mhm.
Obama era especially, as being Jon Stewart, like
Jon Stewart's
it's
fault in some
Jon
way,
Stewart's
right?
fault
Yeah.
is putting far too much on one individual cable channel news station's shoulders when it is
Sure.
more representative of, you know, a broader populist miscalculation that really didn't start to course correct until someone like Trump came along and put into stark reality like what the stakes actually are. And so Stewart is a convenient vehicle, and he represents that malaise and that kind of lazy liberalism that certainly defined a lot of the Obama era for sure. I'm certainly guilty of participating in myself. But I don't know that it necessarily like that Stewart was going to solve that either. And so I guess for me, I think it's more, that's why I find the reaction to Stewart and people's own shifting political positions to be more interesting than what Stewart does or doesn't do, because ultimately I don't think Stewart will have any meaningful impact on like
I think
the
that's all
votes at the end of the year, which doesn't mean he should waste the platform. It's still a platform.
Right.
I guess for me, I don't know what that platform means quite yet. And I'll be curious to see like what he chooses to shine a spotlight on. Going to Tucker Carlson in the second episode is a very convenient, easy bait.
Right.
That's. I mean, how many segments has he done on Tucker Carlson over the course of his career?
Right. I think that's all accurate, Patrick Klepek, what you said, and there are people who say that Jon Stewart is responsible for, you know, the lack of civic engagement amongst a significant group of liberals, and I would agree that I don't know that he's responsible. He might be emblematic of it, you know, he might
I think
represent
that's
it in
more
some way.
accurate. Yes,
Right, but I don't think he's responsible for it. By the way, I've been kind of alluding vaguely to what some of the issues that I think are more important. Google the phrase Trump's second term if you are curious, like all the things that Trump said he is going to do if he is elected president for the second term. And those are the things that I'm talking about that I think actually require more attention. Patrick Klepek, I think that you know, your expectations were set in the correct place for this. I think I was just wondering and hoping that maybe Jon Stewart would be able to show us something like a different, perhaps more focused or harder edge sensibility in his second stint in the chair. And I'm disappointed that he has not been. He doesn't seem to be interested in doing that.
I'm far more disappointed in Stephen Colbert than I'll ever be in Jon Stewart. I thought Colbert was smarter, more biting, more insightful. And look, I'm not going to knock somebody that wants to do a different type of job, but the way Colbert has just laxed into like a late night show Tom Hanks is one of the more disappointing falls for political like satirical comedian. I held Colbert in much higher esteem than I ever did Stewart, and the way that Colbert has fallen, that will hurt my soul more than whatever Stewart does. And maybe that has more to do. Maybe that is ultimately like what I'm getting at here is like I don't think like that has hurt me in the last 10 years more than Stewart not quite getting
like
it.
You felt there was more potential for Colbert to do something really interesting and meaningful. And he has chosen a career path that, while it might be very personally fulfilling and financially fulfilling for him, doesn't do that.
No, and it makes me happy that someone like John Oliver exists, because I think John Oliver is, in many ways, represents an evolved version of Stewart and Colbert's work. It understands the modern internet, and it's like it's very deep. It's deeply informative. It's still really funny, and the two of them just like one goes to a late night show, one returns to an aging daily news. You know what I mean? It's a little bit of a bummer that both of them seem to have not found ways to continue some of their strongest approaches to the work in a format that makes sense like this century. Whereas Oliver seems to have figured that part out.
Yeah, I mean that's fair, Patrick Klepek. You're saying, your expectations for the upper bound of what Jon Stewart could have accomplished were not particularly high to begin with, and so his return here doesn't disappoint you that much, or really at all. It sounds like.
I did chuckle though. Like I
Yeah,
have not had a bad time watching the couple of episodes.
yeah, I
Though I
think
will
that's right.
say enjoyed watching his. No offense to Klepper, like he's fine, but it was more of a chore to get through to his episode than it was to get through Stewart's. I'll say
I think he's a perfectly adequate kind of
totally.
uh, successor, if that's even what he is, right? To Stewart, he has the kind of honestly, almost like a similar hairstyle. He has the similar mannerisms. Like I think he's a perfectly adequate Jon Stewart substitute. And also, like, say what you will about Klepper, he actually gets out there. He's out there.
Oh,
He's
it's
still
his strongest stuff.
Yeah.
Like in the studio, I'm falling asleep. But
Mhm.
like when he's out there talking to people where he has to do a lot of improv, I think that's where he's at his real strength.
I do think, I have this feeling when I'm watching it there is this kind of, I feel like those segments, while they are like really comedically interesting at times, and give you a glimpse of people you might not otherwise interact with, there is this kind of notion that creeps in when I'm watching this show of like, what is the purpose of, like, a lot of the show is just pointing and laughing,
Yeah.
and that was very enjoyable and satisfying maybe when I was in college, but it holds less interest for me these days,
It really
because
is the old Daily Show ethos, but like done in
yes,
field segment. It's like, hey, I'm smarter than these people,
right,
and
right,
look at these dumb people who are getting suckered into buying Trump debit cards that don't have any cash on them. It's like,
yeah,
okay, do I laugh in the segment? Yeah, I'm shallow. Like I will laugh at that. It's funny, but the moment you have any distance from it, I think you end up feeling pretty empty because it doesn't
right,
tell me anything about this person, this
yeah.
movement. Like, I think it's very much in line with the old Daily Show ethos, in a way that is equally disappointing.
It's the political equivalent of junk food.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, that feels good going down, but like at the end, it leaves me empty. I'm no better a person than I was when I went into this.
And
Stewart did
junk food
address,
can be okay. Like, like it's
yeah,
okay to just have something that like goes through your brain and you don't like. It's all like life is hard, and sometimes it's okay to have. Like, I
yeah,
feel like sometimes it's everyone has their version of that, and if the Daily Show or those segments are yours, Godspeed. Like, like everyone's got their version of something like that. But I think where you and I are landing on this is I think the ratio is off on like having moments like that are pure just sort of pointing a finger and laughing at something that feels objectively hypocritically stupid, but then also some manner of substance to go along with it.
And to be fair, they do bring on guests every night, and some of the guests are really, they're authors who have thought deeply about the political issues of our day, and they do engage in those things. But I do think it makes for an unwieldy marriage of these two segments, where, like, in one you're trying to be thoughtful and have this discourse, and the other there's this again, all the issues we've discussed, this tone of detachment and condescension, and um and also kind of, I don't think he I certainly don't think he like takes the criticism, is seriously the right word. I mean, here's what he said in episode 2 about all the reactions to his first episode.
But I guess, as the famous saying goes, democracy dies in discussion.
So I certainly don't think he's going to change his approach, based off of that. So
No, that's a glib way of responding to like, even if I disagree with the criticism of Stewart that arrives at that glib response he provides, all you're doing is just reaffirming like
right,
the soft criticism of him in the first place. Like if there was, a joke or even a glib response tied up in like, hey, I actually think this is healthy for like the Democratic Party to reckon with, like, this is how we've arrived and what we should be thinking about. Like, again, there's like a way of talking through that and even doing so humorously. But like, that's the bad Jon Stewart. Like, that's the one that makes me wonder, did you put that segment in with Klepper where you're talking about, like, I understand how people talked about me. Like, did you? Like, do you, like, did you? And I don't know that you can definitively say that, because ultimately the way that that's going to manifest is in the work as opposed to a scripted comedic bit between one of the other hosts of the show. And I think moments like that, which are much less likely to be scripted and much more likely to be improving, is probably truer to the soul of Jon Stewart than anything else.
I think you're also right about it's okay to want the junk food, but also I think it's important to know that it's junk food. You know, like to understand the weaknesses of the food that or the media that you're consuming, and to be like, hey, okay, that made me feel good for a little bit. Now, if I actually want the world to change, I need to actually do some work. You know, or not just kind of laugh at all the problems around me. So, end of the day, I think Jon Stewart delivered on what he delivered back in the day for sure. And for me personally, it's just not what I'm interested in anymore. But if it is something you're still interested in, I think that's completely fine. But let's just be realistic about what that actually is. Hey everyone, David Chen here. Thank you so much for watching that video from Decoding TV. If you want to get an audio version of the show, all you got to do is go to podcast.decodingtv.com. And if you want to support what we do, get ad-free episodes of the podcast and also bonus episodes of the podcast, go to decodingtv.com and become a paid member. Of course, you can also like and subscribe for more. We appreciate it. Thanks. See you later.